Counsel asked you about a deadbolt lock. You remember that? And she asked you if it could only be locked from the inside. You remember that?
Objection leading.
Overruled. It's foundational.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Did it have a keyhole on it?
Yes, it did.
So could it have been locked from the outside of the apartment?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
With a key, yes, it can.
Thank you. Now, counsel asked you some questions when you were looking at some clips about things being more incendiary or some of the items being more incendiary than explosive. Is that right?
That is correct.
So incendiary devices are completely safe, right? They can't kill anybody, they can't hurt anybody. Is that correct?
Objection leading and argumentative.
All right, wait till he finishes the question. The objection as to leading is sustained. Rephrase the question. That's Rule 611C. Go ahead.
Are incendiary devices by their very nature safe?
No, they are not.
Are they dangerous?
Yes, they are.
Can they kill people?
Yes, they can.
Can they hurt people?
Yes, they can.
Can they burn down apartment buildings full of sleeping people?
Your Honor, argumentative 403. Leading.
The objection as to argumentative under 611A is overruled. The objection as to leading is overruled under 611C, and the objection as to relevance is overruled under 401 and 402.
Please answer.
Yes.
If a police officer enters an apartment with an incendiary device connected to a booby trap, can it kill him?
Yes, it can.
Can it hurt him?
Yes, it can.
Let's talk about the gasoline that you talked about on cross-examination. And counsel asked you a question about containment causing explosions. Is that right?
Containment.
In other words, you have to have a container really for some things to explode. Is that right?
Usually, yes. Yeah.
In other words, low explosives need a container?
No.
Okay. What do they need to explode?
To explode?
Yeah.
Just a proper chemical mixture.
Okay. Well, do you remember counsel asking you some questions about those, I'll call them fireworks mortar shells. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
And how that could be a container for an explosion. Do you remember that?
It can be, yes.
And she also asked you about them containing gasoline. Were you aware that inside those 6-inch shells was a smaller 3-inch shell?
Yes, we did find out that was the case.
And do you know what was inside the smaller 3-inch shell that was in those 6-inch shells?
It was black powder.
Huh. So what happens when you put black powder inside a fireworks shell that's designed to explode?
It has a tendency to explode.
Is that an explosive?
Yes, it is.
Now, by the time you were manipulating these objects and they seemed to fall apart when you were squeezing them with the robot, do you know how long they'd been in that apartment?
At least 24 hours.
Or do you know how long whatever liquid had been inside them had been there?
I couldn't tell you that.
Do you know whether or not that liquid could act as a solvent to soften and weaken those shells?
Yes, it could.
So by the time well, let me ask you this. By the time you did that, could those shells have been in a much weaker and softer condition than when they were originally put in there?
Yes, because they're not made to hold gasoline or anything like that.
Let's talk about gasoline, because you talked about that in cross-examination. You talked about gasoline in the apartment. Can gasoline, if it's in a confined space, cause an explosion?
Yes, it can.
Now, if you saturate an apartment with gasoline and gasoline vapors and they are set off on fire, can that cause the entire apartment to explode?
Yes, it can.
And then, really, wouldn't that turn the entire apartment into a giant explosive device?
Objection, Your Honor. Form of the question. Argumentative. Leading.
The objection as to argumentative is overruled under 611A. The objection as to leading under 611C is sustained. Rephrase the question, please.
What is an explosive device?
An explosive device is, it could be many, many things. An explosive device is when the chemical makeup within a enclosed area reaches a proper mixture, and when it is ignited, will cause an explosion.
Now, you talked about the apartment could explode from the gasoline. Does an explosive device have to be something small?
No, it does not.
Can it be as big as an apartment?
Yes, it can.
All right, so, well, I think you've answered my question. Counsel asked you about those jars on the chairs with the bullets in them. Remember that? And whether you thought those were incendiary devices more than explosive devices?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about what she asked you about those jars. Did you see those jars had bullets in them?
Yes, they did.
Okay. And you probably don't know this because you've been under sequestration, but we've had previous evidence in this case that the defendant bought.
I'm going to object to this.
She asked him if those jars were incendiary devices.
Right, hold on. Overruled.
We've had previous testimony in this case that the defendant said that there was napalm in those jars. Is napalm a flammable substance?
Yes, it is.
And so would that be concurrent with your position that you stated to counsel in cross-examination that that would be a inflammatory, I'm sorry,
Incendiary.
incendiary, I forgot it, incendiary device?
Yes.
And does that mean it would burn?
Excuse me?
Does that mean it would burn?
It has a tendency, yes.
What happens to bullets when you burn them?
Well, the black powder within them, basically it can heat up and ignite, and the gases, it off-gases, and the shell casing can explode.
Does that sound like a gunshot?
Yes, it can.
So it's an incendiary device starting a fire. Does the fire department often come to that?
Yes.
Overruled.
So what happens when the fire guys, in your experience, approach a fire started by an incendiary device and hear what sounds like gunshots? Are they going to keep putting out that fire?
No, they're not going to go near the fire.
Well, why not?
Because it's putting other people in harm's way, because if they're hearing any type of explosion or any type of ammunition going off, they're not going to put their firemen in harm's way.
So would those bullets potentially make that incendiary device that you talked about in cross-examination even more effective?
Yes, it can, yes.
Because no one's going to want to put out that fire, right?
Correct.
I have nothing further.